3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
All right, welcome to Roots of Reality. I'm your host, Ben Baumann, and today I'm going to be talking about ancestors. So all of us here today are only here because of the people that came before us, our ancestors. These people have made countless sacrifices for us, and therefore today I would like to talk about my own ancestors a bit, hoping that perhaps these stories will inspire you to reflect more on your own ancestry. Because when you learn about where you come from, I think it ultimately helps give you a healthier perspective on your own life. However, before I begin, I would just first like to give a shout out to the most recent common ancestors of all people alive today. And this is Y chromosomal Adam and mitochondrial Eve, who lived in Africa at different times about a few 100,000 years ago. Now, these are not the literary figures of the Bible, but they are named after them. And we know these people existed from the DNA testing of populations around the world, which has shown that all people alive today share these genetic markers that originated in these specific people in Africa thousands of years ago. And this was a big part of a National Geographic project called the Genographic Project, which did this research, showing how we are all connected in the human story. Anyway, these people would ultimately survive and eventually lead to all of us being here right now. So it's kind of a cool and interesting thing because we all have African ancestry and we are all related. Beyond this, though, in terms of common ancestry of many people around the world, many of us also share ancestry via historical figures. For example, it is not uncommon if you have any European ancestry to be able to trace your ancestry via genealogy to European royalty and people like Charlemagne or William the Conqueror, the King of England. And this is because these people obviously survived and had many children, and so the number of descendants that they have, especially over several generations, is just, millions of people. In fact, even I can trace my ancestry back to European royalty when I go back through my family's genealogy. So this represents another interesting aspect in the different ways that people are connected. Now, for some specific stories of my own ancestry regarding people who made sacrifices for me to be here today. In the 1700s, there was a father and son named Thomas and Ebenezer Plimpton, whose family originated in England but came over as colonists to Massachusetts as indentured servants. And so, in the 1700s, Thomas and Ebenezer, who were the descendants of the original colonists that came over in the 1600s, really believed in the concept of freedom and democracy. In fact, so much so that they would fight in the very first battle of the American Revolutionary War, a battle called the Battle of Lexington and Concord, when the British in 1775 were invading Massachusetts to confiscate weapons and ensure there was no ability for the colonists to maintain a military. And it was this battle where the famous shot heard around the world came about, after someone, we're not really sure who, fired the first shot starting this war. And this was a battle that was pretty inspiring because for these early American colonists, this was a ragtag group of people that were farmers, people that were craftsmen or, just kind of had these working class occupations that were putting their livelihoods on the line for their democratic beliefs and their belief that they needed to protect their home against one of the best militaries in the world, representing the British Empire. So this is something that really took guts, and luckily my ancestors, Thomas and Ebenezer, survived this battle and survived the war. And because of them and people like them, I'm not only here today, but I live in a nation that is a democracy in a world where, unfortunately, democracy is still a foreign concept to many nations. Now turning towards another ancestor of mine, we have Martha Adams. She and her husband, Robert, would make a big choice out of desperation to leave Ireland for America in the 1800s. Due to the potato famine, which would kill, about 1 million people. So luckily they were able to survive that and get out of Ireland. Unfortunately, though, after their arrival, Robert Adams would tragically die, leaving Martha widowed with 6 kids. However, despite this, she took care of her family and started a small variety store and gave her kids a future, which, again, eventually led to me. And then another example of the crucial decisions that people sometimes have to make when it comes to family history. There are my ancestors, Hardmans and Elizabeth Botting, who, like my Irish ancestors, came from England to the U.S. in the 1800s. But when they wanted to get married in England before coming to the U.S., Elizabeth's family was completely against it and didn't want her to marry Hardmans. However, Elizabeth didn't care and married him anyway. But as a result, her family would disown her and never speak with her again because of this decision. However, luckily for me, because of her decision, I'm here today. And lastly, my next example comes from Heinrich Baumann, who was my great-great-grandfather, and was born in 1857 in a small village in Switzerland. However, he was born out of wedlock, so his parents were not married when he was born, which unfortunately likely caused a bit of a social stigma, because things like that were pretty taboo, especially in the 1800s in a small religious community in a village. Anyway, though, he would grow up pretty poor and would later move to the city of Zurich and have a wife and a couple kids, and was working long hours in a silk mill factory, an era where there wasn't much regulation when it came to worker rights. And, people were in many ways kind of like wage slaves where they didn't have much going on. And he and his wife, Selena, struggled to balance their long work hours, taking care of their children, and still being super poor, where they had to eat lots of things like cabbage soup all the time, just trying to survive. So eventually they would decide to move to the U.S. in 1888, which dramatically changed their lives and build a life that they dreamed of and give their kids and their descendants a future. And so all these people that I just give examples of made huge sacrifices for me to be here. And these are only a few stories of many who made sacrifices for me. I mean, even more recently in my family history, my grandfather and namesake, Benjamin Rush, fought in World War II in the Battle of the Bulge, which is one of the deadliest battles for American soldiers in the Second World War. And he was wounded there and served throughout the war, but survived. Thus, with that, when we go through our daily lives, there's always these challenges, always these problems that we're dealing with. But our family history can serve as a reminder to us of what we can overcome, and that we can survive this world like they did and make changes in our lives, which one day may be written in the genealogies of our descendants. Because after all, you are the result of them overcoming their own challenges throughout history, and that's in your DNA. Whether it's, your family surviving wars or diseases or overcoming poverty, that's what we're literally born to do. As a species, we're problem solvers. And I think when you know more about all the problems that your ancestors had to solve for you to be here, I think that not only just makes you incredibly humble and thankful for the life that you have, but also can be pretty inspiring for the future you want to create. I mean, after all, knowing about my own ancestry changed my life. And therefore, I encourage you to research your own ancestry, whether it's genealogy or through DNA testing or just talking to family members and interviewing them and recording them. You should learn about your family's story, which can hopefully help you in your own journey called life. So with that, as always, remember, billions of years led to you. So make the most of it.